Happy holidays, everybody. Welcome to our final webcast of the year, Surgical Robots in the Digital OR. My name is Steve Crow, Managing Editor of Robotics Trends. Thanks so much for being here. Today's webcast is brought to you by Maxon Motor. Maxon develops precision drive systems, including brushed and brushless DC motors. Maxon combines electric motors, gears, and DC motor controls into high-precision, intelligent drive systems that can be custom-made to fit the specific needs of customer applications. For more information, please visit maxonmotor.com. This webcast will be archived on roboticsbusinessreview.com shortly after it ends. So if you want to rewatch the presentation or pass it along to a colleague, you'll be able to rewatch the entire event. So what are we here to talk about today? We'll examine what robotics is currently doing for surgery and whether or not it can do more. We'll also discuss some recent trends and the major challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. Quick look at the panelists. I'm here with Gene Demetri, Senior Editor of Robotics Business Review. Gene, thanks for being here. Gene and I will chat with Scott Hamilton, Sales Engineer for Northern California at Maxon Motor, and Chris Wagner. He's the Head of Advanced Surgical Systems at Cambridge Consultants. They got some pretty cool stuff going on that we'll show you guys. And last but not least, you'll hear from Dr. Sanjeev Dutta, the Vice President of Medical Devices at Johnson & Johnson, which together with Google formed Verb Surgical. For more information on surgical and healthcare robotics after today's webcast, make sure you visit roboticsbusinessreview.com and download our Healthcare Robotics Report. The report looks at market sizing data, key market drivers. It also takes deep dives into 4 healthcare robotics areas that you should really keep an eye on going forward: surgical robots, pharmacy robots, exoskeletons, and elder care robots. So without further ado, let's get to our first guest. We're joined now by Scott Hamilton. He's a sales engineer at Maxon Motors, responsible for all of Northern California. Scott, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, absolutely. No, this is great. I'm glad we were able to set it up.
You've been with Maxon for the last 12 years or so, helping provide the motors that Intuitive Surgical uses in its surgical robots. So you've been around the market for some time now. What surgical procedures have you seen benefit most from robotics, and what areas can robots be used a little bit better?
Part of the advantage of the robotic surgery right now is that essentially it can be used anywhere in the abdominal cavity where laparoscopic surgery has used previously. So the idea, obviously, of laparoscopic surgery is that it's minimally invasive. You don't have to open up the abdomen entirely. You cut essentially little ports at a couple different locations, so the recovery time is much quicker. And it's a lot less painful for the patient during that period. So I know that a lot of times what these surgical robots attempt to make laparoscopic surgery easier for the doctor to perform, and that's really the benefit of using a surgical robot, is it makes laparoscopic surgery itself easier for the doctor. There's a lot of issues as far as ergonomics, where the doctor is able to sit at a console instead of leaning over a patient, those kinds of things. And then the reflected benefit to the patient, as far as I understand it, is, again, quicker healing time and less pain during that process.
One of the benefits of robotics, not just on the surgical side, but on many different areas when it comes to automating, the workforce, is that they are supposed to perform the job better than a human can. What's the rate of complication from robot surgery compared to that surgeries performed by humans? And, where does the liability typically fall when there's a complication involved?
The way that these robotic surgeries are conducted now, the doctor is in the operating room with the patient. So if something does go wrong, if, for instance, the robot fails or has some kind of a problem, the doctor can then proceed to a normal conventional surgery because they're right there with the patient. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I understand that that is a safety protocol that they have implemented, because in case something goes wrong with the robot, the doctor is there to assist.
Well, what's one of the reasons that it might fail?
Well, there's a host of reasons. It's a mechanical system, and mechanical systems break down. Even something as reliable as your washing machine, eventually is going to break. So I guess what I would say is, a motor could reach its end of life and stop operating. There could be a power failure. Even something as simple as a cable might get cut, inadvertently. Somebody runs into it and then it gets unplugged, and then you lose control over what's going on with the robot.
That leads to our next question. So, how are surgical robots improving on the hardware side? How are they getting more reliable, more accurate, more precise, more dexterous? What do you see from your point of view in terms of the technological improvement?
Well, I guess the answer to that would be just that technology is continuing to get smaller, more precise. Quality continues to go up. So, as an example, these motors that we supply to various surgical companies, they use rare earth magnets. And rare earth magnets have become more and more powerful over the years, and so we can now get the same performance out of a smaller package size, go from a motor that's, say, 16 millimeters in diameter to 13 millimeters in diameter, and that allows for, a smaller entry port for the robot to get into the abdominal cavity, for instance. At the same time, we have encoder technologies which have been increasing in resolution. We've been able to move to absolute encoders, so they know where they are in 360 degrees. It's not just an incremental encoder. You turn it on and it says, oh, I know exactly what angle I'm located, and that allows for higher precision when doing surgeries.
What's the most important component when it comes to the Da Vinci robot operating properly? Is it the encoder? Is it the motor?
Well, really, it's the encoder, is what I would say. So and when I say encoder, it's actually the whole servo drive system. So what I mean by that is that, a servo motor works by error. When there's a commanded position and the encoder says, hey, we're not in that commanded position, and so it generates a move to get the motor to go to that correct position. And what Intuitive has done, what really all of these surgical companies have done, is they have locked in the safest and highest performing servo loop that I've ever seen. Really, if you think about it, there is a robot that if it were to get out of control and all of a sudden has a runaway situation where it's just going crazy and it's around all of these sensitive organs, it would result conceivably in a patient dying on an operating table. So they have implemented these procedures and this servo loop, again, based on the encoder, but really on the whole intelligence of their system that has locked in and protects the patient from any kind of an accident of that kind of nature. That is the most critical part of these robots.
Speaking of developing these components for surgical robotics, does Maxon use 3D printing for prototyping or actual production of components?
We use 3D printing for prototyping for proof of concept. In fact, I'm actually looking at a motor for Intuitive Surgical that was 3D printed on my desk right now. So yes, we do it for proof of concept. We do it to show, this is what we think the orientation of this connector will be coming off of the side. We can build up dummy motors that obviously don't operate because they've been 3D printed. And that allows us to provide samples, provide proof of concept in a timely manner, in a matter of days as opposed to the lead time of weeks to get motors built.
Scott, not sure if you saw the recent 60 Minutes report on how artificial intelligence, specifically IBM Watson, is impacting the healthcare industry, but it was a fascinating report. Essentially, they discussed how AI has made more progress in the past 5 years than in the previous 50 years, and some of the major benefits that are coming along with that. But just give us your thoughts on how you see AI impacting surgery.
One thing that I understand from pretty much every surgical robotic company that I've worked with is that there is not at this time a move to eliminate the trained medical professional being part of that surgery. They want that doctor in the room. It's a liability issue. At one time, there was talk of, especially for the U.S. military, that they wanted to be able to have these robots operate remotely. So you can imagine a soldier on the front lines, they're in a firefight, it's too dangerous a location. You know, the number one thing if there's an injury, a combat wound, is you need to treat that soldier as quickly as possible. So there was talk of having these mobile surgical platforms that would be out on a battlefield, and they would be operated remotely by a doctor who was nowhere nearby. That was originally one of the ideas that people had been talking about with these surgical robots. To my knowledge, no one has actually implemented that. I think that they might still be working on it, but one of the fears with that process is, you know, what happens if your link goes down while, you know, a robot is inside working on somebody? What are you going to do at that point, right? So, you know, I believe that the focus is still on having doctors in the room ready to intervene in case anything goes wrong. And I don't know how AI fits into that discussion. I'm sure it's being looked at, but I believe the idea is always to have that doctor with his eyes on what's actually happening in front of him.
And so that leads to the question, I guess, in terms of speculation, do you think it's ever possible that either fully autonomous robotic surgeons would be likely or useful, or do you think that they're always going to want a human in the loop? Looking further out, maybe not worrying about current liability issues or connectivity issues, do you think it's ever possible?
I think it's absolutely possible. I think it's completely likely that that will happen. I don't think it will happen in my lifetime, but I think that maybe for my grandchildren, that eventually there will be, especially simple operations, for instance, an appendectomy or something like that, that there will be fully autonomous surgeries that are performed by a robot. I believe part of the problem is going to be, like you mentioned, from a liability standpoint, and maybe these surgical robots aren't in the U.S. based on our, you know, current litigious tendencies that we have here. Maybe they're only going to be in Germany. I don't know. But I think that definitely will come at some point when AI has reached a point, and also, frankly, vision systems have reached a point where, you know, a robot, an artificial program can diagnose what's going on inside someone's abdominal cavity and make the decisions themselves. Yes, I think that will happen, but not anytime soon.
Do you think patients want that?
So I think that will come, but I think it's going to be a change in, I think it will come as people become more and more used to robots being part of daily life, right? So right now, a robot is something that, you know, puts together a car. You know, you don't interact with these things every day, but that's going to change. You know, there's going to be robots that are in the service industry. They're going to help senior citizens. They're going to be folding people's laundry. They're going to be doing all kinds of stuff. And as we get more and more used to robots in our daily life, we'll be more open to giving some of these tasks over to robots to perform for us, up to and including surgery, I believe. But again, that's going to take a little bit of a change in our comfortableness and our interaction with robots on a daily life.
So what do you think are the biggest challenges that are still facing surgical robots before we get to the point where they are being used by more hospitals and more doctors, and they eventually do replace doctors altogether? What are some of the main challenges that still have to be overcome?
So I think the biggest challenge that surgical robots face right now is that they are fairly large installations, right? I mean, it is a large capital investment for a hospital, and then you have a dedicated suite that you need to keep busy, right? You know, you don't want to have an operating room that isn't in use. And if you have a dedicated suite with a robot in it, you need to have enough surgeries that robot can perform to keep that suite operating. So there's a couple ways around that problem. One, you could go to a smaller, cheaper version of a robot. I know it doesn't sound great when you talk about surgeries to say cheaper is better, but frankly, cheaper piece of capital equipment would expose it to more potential customers in hospitals, right? You know, you don't need a big, rich hospital. You could go out to some rural ones. The other part of it would be to come up with a system that doesn't require a dedicated surgical suite. Lots of companies out there are working on that kind of option. And then the third way that you could attack that is by opening up for more and more surgeries. So when the Da Vinci was first introduced, I think it was only able to do hysterectomies and appendectomies. But as it's gone on, it's been opened up for more and more surgeries, and that keeps that surgical suite busy. You know, you're not waiting for your next appendix to come in. You say, no, I have another surgery that I can do with that, you know, maybe resecting someone's colon or something like that, and get them into that surgical suite and keep it busy. Once you can keep that surgical suite operating 24 hours a day, the capital equipment investment is not as big a problem for various hospitals. I think that's really how they're attacking it to expand that market.
Scott Hamilton, sales engineer for Northern California at Maxon Motors. Thanks again for joining us. Appreciate the insight, and hopefully we can talk again soon.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. I'm glad we were able to set it up.
One of Scott's main points is the need for surgical robots to be smaller. So that's what we're going to turn our attention to now, as we're joined by Chris Wagner, head of advanced surgical systems at Cambridge Consultants. Chris has been in the medical field for more than 15 years, and he completed his PhD in surgical robotics, specifically looking at force feedback. Cambridge Consultants has built a robot prototype for cataract surgery called Axis. Now, again, Axis isn't being sold as a commercial product. It's simply a prototype that shows what next-gen surgical robots could look like and what they could do. Axis uses flexible instruments instead of straight ones, and it also has novel motor and control configurations that help reduce the overall size of the robot and also make it safer by eliminating the need for a large range of motion outside the body. So, Chris, thanks again for joining us. What are some of the compromises that were made to enable Axis to be so small? Is Axis just as accurate and safe as larger surgical robots?
Right, yeah. So there are a number of trade-offs, and so our Axis system represents one particular set of trade-offs, and trying to say that there's maybe a more advantageous kind of set of trade-offs, but there's always going to be trade-offs pushing you either which way. One of the trade-offs is that's making current robotics big is this serial chain of motors and links. And so let's say you've got to hold this tool up above the patient, and you want that to be robotically positioned. And the way that the current robots are designed, mounted to the floor, there's a motor, and then there's a link, and there's a motor, and there's a link. That means that the initial motor needs to hold the weight, not just of the tool and then the forces that you're applying to the body, but the weight of all of those other motors and links in succession. And so that motor then needs to be very large to carry all the weight of the motors and links further down the chain. And you can imagine as you go back, that makes the whole thing a lot bigger. So we tried to see if there's a way of getting around that aspect. So that's a serial chain manipulator. So what we designed was a parallel manipulator. So instead of having motor link, we have all of our motors attached to the base, and then we make up for that using a lightweight transmission. And we use cable drives, which is a common design approach for parts of the tools in current surgical robotics, to go up the tool and provide the articulation. So that way, no motor is carrying the weight of any other motor, and so you don't need as large of actuators. So that's one thing that we've done here. The other one is making the observation that, so what I was trying to get at with the pushing against the body wall and the motion of the robots on the outside of the body conflicting with the other arms. So that comes from having to control a long, straight instrument, which offers you good benefits in terms of stiffness at the tip of the robot, which is good for applying forces onto the environment, but is difficult in terms of keeping your external robot small. So what we've done is, instead of using a straight articulator, we've moved all the movement to the inside of the body and using a flexible instrument or articulation mechanism. So nothing moves on the outside of the body. The robot on the outside of the body doesn't move, and so that reduces the range of motion outside of the body. So that means the robot can be smaller, and also improves the safety aspect. No large arms are moving around that can whack the attending surgeon or a nurse who's sitting beside the patient. So that those are several ways that we're making the trade-off. So what remains is straight performance of the manipulation against the tissue. So then, to make sure you have high performance, you want to try to make a as stiff as possible but flexible manipulator, and you also want to make as low friction manipulator as possible to, again, minimize losses and keep your actuators as small as possible. So that's the other benefit of how we've designed the Axis system, is that it's designed as a series of rolling metal links. And so that from the standpoint of the tissue, it's all metal all the way up, meaning it's very stiff as opposed to using a flexible, a more flexible material. But it's a series of rolling links as opposed to pin joints or sliding in order to minimize friction and thus minimize any frictional losses which you'd have to overcome with your actuator. So I think what we're trying to do is take a big step down in terms of the robot size and then try to see how far we can get in terms of performance using this flexible actuator type system.
How much smaller or lighter is Axis in comparison to other surgical robotic systems that are out there?
The Axis system is 1.8 millimeters in outer diameter and can articulate through a space, as for cataract surgery, of about 10 millimeters on the inside. Current surgical robots, and there are a number of them that are at earlier stages of development and ones that are fully cleared for FDA use. So current, like the Da Vinci system has 10 millimeter, 8 millimeter, and some 5 millimeter diameter tools. So this is much smaller than that. There are other surgical robots that offer different performance trade-offs, but with even smaller access. So there's another ocular robot for ophthalmology called the Precise system, and that's essentially holding a needle. And so the needle is obviously very small, less than a millimeter, but has no articulation at the end beyond just that straight stick motion. What we're trying to do is compare ourselves to traditional surgical robotic instruments, and so we're less than half the size of those.
Now, are there other areas of the body where surgical robotics can expand or begin operating because of this extra precision? Right now, a lot of it is in the abdominal cavity, but are there other types of procedures that you can envision where surgical robotics could be extended to?
I think so, and I think that's the benefit of a system like this. We're trying to show what's possible, and then have everybody come up with, well, where can this be applied to? So one part that I'm interested in is neurostimulators and neurostimulator implants. So these are small electrical devices that are placed next to a nerve to achieve some therapeutic benefit. And currently, it's mainly pain relief. You can place them on the spine, but there's newer therapies being discovered all the time. So from cluster headaches to epilepsy to even things like obesity. And so currently these neurostimulators are fairly large, the size of like maybe a matchbook. But we see as time goes on over the next 5-10 years, they're getting down much smaller, down to the size of a microchip. And so then the question becomes, how do you place this small, grain of rice size is one aspiration. How do you place this small microstimulator next to a very specific nerve and not damage anything that's around that nerve? So, and nerves are commonly bundled with other sensitive nerves and with arteries and other blood vessels. So if we had the advantage of robotics to help deliver this next generation of neurostimulator technology, so benefits like motion scaling and tremor reduction and ideally image guidance, I think that opens up a new range of therapies that's not possible today.
Do you think surgical robots will ever get to a point where they actually completely replace the doctors and the surgeons?
I don't. So I don't think so, and definitely not on the near term. So the sorts of benefits that surgical robotics can provide are things like motion scaling and things like critical structure avoidance, but the surgeon is still doing most of the manipulation. And I mean, during a surgery, I think that's one thing that people need to realize is that the direct manipulation aspects of the surgery is actually a small part of what's on the surgeon's mind and what the surgeon is trying to deliver. The surgeon is trying to manage this entire procedure and is paying attention to the patient as a whole, other potential outcomes, both their knowledge of the preoperative assessment and their knowledge of anatomy of how to access a certain a certain space and then achieve through manipulation of the tissue some outcome. So I think the surgeon's concentrating on so many different things where the robot is affecting a small subset of those. And so that's where I see the benefit of robotics is, well, let's let the robot do the aspect that the robot is good at, so scaling motion or precision handling, freeing up the surgeon to make these higher level decisions that only the surgeon can make. So I definitely don't see the case where the robot is replacing the surgeons. What I do hope is that with better robotic technology, surgeons with less training on a particular type of procedure can still deliver the same quality outcomes that a more experienced surgeon can deliver with less training. So hopefully that will increase the number of surgeries and thus benefits to patients that can be delivered. And I guess that's how I see robotics in the medical space developing, not in the case of taking anybody's jobs. I think that just the decision-making aspects to that to a surgery is just too great.
Chris Wagner, Head of Advanced Surgical Systems at Cambridge Consultants, thanks again for your time. As a reminder, for more information on surgical and healthcare robotics after today's webcast, make sure to visit roboticsbusinessreview.com and download our Healthcare Robotics Report, which takes a deep dive into 4 healthcare robotics areas that everybody listening to today's show should really keep an eye on going forward. Those are surgical robots, pharmacy robots, exoskeletons, and elder care robots. The report also has data about market sizing, key market drivers, and company profiles. Our final guest today is Sanjeev Dutta, VP of Medical Devices at Johnson & Johnson's Innovation Center. He works primarily with the Medical Science and Technology team as the therapeutic area expert for robotics and minimally invasive surgery. Of course, in March 2015, Johnson & Johnson and Google announced a partnership to develop new robot-assisted surgery technologies. That partnership is called Verb Surgical. Dr. Dutta recently sat down with our former editor-in-chief, Tom Green, to discuss the progress Verb Surgical has made so far in digitizing the operating room. Dutta kicks off the conversation with some background about Verb Surgical.
It really is conceptualizing robotics toward a next-generation product that really leverages the great benefits of incorporating software into a surgical system. And that, I think, is what really makes it unique.
In what sense? What's the software? There's not software now with Intuitive Surgical?
Absolutely. That's a great point. So the focus hitherto has been on enabling surgeons in technical skills. Okay, with the advent of minimally invasive surgery, what became apparent is that the skill set required to perform laparoscopic operations was quite a bit higher than what's required to perform open operations. And so the emphasis historically has been on enabling the technical skill of the surgeon. And that was the basis for robotic systems and other types of systems that had an eye towards making minimally invasive surgery easier. The fact of the matter is that while there is a range of technical ability, most folks who did a lot of minimally invasive surgery actually got pretty good at it. That represented a large part of the market. And then being able to demonstrate that an augmentation of technical ability in a population of practitioners that were already quite proficient at minimally invasive surgery, and I'm really talking mainly about the general surgeons out there who were early adopters of laparoscopic surgery. It's very difficult to show that this has a demonstrable impact on that population of folks. There's another population of folks that want to do minimally invasive surgery but simply don't have the capability or maybe even are skeptical of it. And the unfortunate issue with that group of folks is that their patients are not availed to the benefits of minimally invasive surgery because they're still doing open surgery. So certainly robotics does enable those folks from a technical perspective and gives their patients the benefit of minimally invasive surgery. But sort of the next frontier of all this is the idea that, well, what is it that a surgeon really does? And the lay public's opinion of what a surgeon does is that they are they're sort of a mechanic for the body, that they're performing manual tasks that help, either remove disease or fix disease, etc. And that is, of course, very true, that the technical ability of the surgeon is very important. But the other aspect of surgery that's critically important, and I would, being a surgeon, I would even argue that there's a greater variability in this other capacity, and certainly probably it's the more important aspect of what a surgeon does, and that is the cognitive skill involved, the judgment, the decision-making, the intraoperative decision-making. Understand that surgeons, unlike medical doctors, don't have the luxury of thinking about a medical problem, sometimes for weeks, maybe doing literature searches, accumulating data and evidence over a long period of time to make decisions. That surgeons must make decisions on the fly in the operating room, sometimes from limited data, and identifying signal from noise. And so the real skill, the greatest surgeons, not only are technically proficient, but they're very honed in their decision-making, which gets me to the benefit of software and leveraging software. Software, unlike other robotics, unlike other platforms, does have software integrated, and as you pointed out, that software has been leveraged to improve technical skill. But really, the ultimate value of that software is also its ability to augment cognitive skill. And that's why I believe it's going to have a significant impact. Putting those two pieces together is going to be vital to the future of robotic surgery.
Well, so if you're operating on someone and you cut them open and you happen to see something very strange, then it would really nice to have Watson there telling you, looking through 10 million medical journals and what it might be and what the best procedure is for removing that or dealing with that. So that's the kind of information that you'd like to have when you're moving very fast during an operation?
That's right. So what you're essentially doing is taking out some of the guesswork. And every surgeon wants that. No surgeon wants to go through an operation where there's uncertainty. The best operations for a surgeon are the ones where you do a really great technical job and you make all the right decisions along the way to create a really great outcome for your patient. And so if you can remove that uncertainty, and you gave a really good example of that, for example, identifying anatomy or identifying abnormal anatomy from normal anatomy, that's one example. Another example may be that for complex operations, giving sort of an augmentation in the ability to perform the operation in the sense that here's the most efficient path to getting to the goal that you want to get to in this operation. It's making suggestions around that, guidance. Now, does the surgeon have to follow that? No, they don't. And I don't think there's a lot of benefit in being very highly prescriptive, but there is a lot of value in, for example, saying, look, we know that the last 10,000 surgeons that have done this operation have done it this way. We know that this is a great, this is the most efficient way to do it or the most effective way to do it. And so we suggest that, you do that. And then that's the software at play in the background, or perhaps even through some sort of user interface. There's a lot of possibilities on how that might be implemented.
Now, on the personal level, as far as the surgeon goes, I speak from experience. This past July, I had a laparoscopic procedure. I had a hernia repaired. So I took the opportunity to ask the surgeon. I said, how come you're not going to do this with a robot? I see a Da Vinci machine you got over there. And he says, I don't want to be a guy hunched over a machine in a corner operating a bunch of arms above your body. He says, I want to be beside your body. He says, do you get that? Operating. He says, that's where I'm at play. That's where I want to be. And I said, well, okay, there's personal opinion in there. Although there's, 3 million operations have been performed by the Da Vinci machine. So, there's room, I guess, for either side to work this. But he was adamant in his feeling towards it. But verb is coming. An interesting thing that Scott mentioned, I think, is one of his articles, is that if you're a surgeon and you have this digital platform, if you need to plug in a store's endoscope, you can do it. You know, or if you need just a robotic arm to go a little bit deeper than you would normally have gone, you can put that arm into this digital kind of platform. So anything that you need to do that job, you can put into the platform. You're not limited by what the robot has, the arms, say the 6 arms or 12 arms or however many. You can plug and play different devices into this digital platform. Do I have that correct, or am I all washed up in that?
Well, I think that the 2 points that you made actually tie to each other. The latter question, and also the idea of the surgeon that says, "Look, I want to be at the bedside. I prefer to work in this way." You actually speak to the same point, believe it or not, and that's this point that Intuitive is a wonderful platform that essentially paved the way. The Da Vinci platform or robot paved the way for robotic surgery, and that is a monumental task and is very impressive. What that surgeon is getting at is, to what extent am I altering my workflow? To what extent am I creating an environment that's catering to the device that I'm using, versus to what extent is that device enabling me in my own environment?
Yeah, great point.
And so that's actually the tension. And so when we talk about creating platforms, what we're talking about is enabling the workflow of the surgeon, not disabling it. And one of the ways that you do that is you create much more user friendliness around modularity, or however else you do that. And more importantly, perhaps, is you pave the way for greater adoption, because ultimately what Verb wants and what J&J wants is for people everywhere to be able to benefit from this technology.
I'm wondering about the genesis of this thing. Like, who started it? We got Google on one side with its Verily Health investment group. We've got SRI on another side, and they've got Taurus. And I guess Verb is kind of interested in some of the aspects of Taurus. So you got SRI involved in it, and now you got J&J, and actually the Ethicon division of J&J is the working party. So it's really Ethicon and Verily, I guess, together, and with a bit of SRI. Is that? I'm sort of confused on it. Could you straighten us out?
Yeah, to the extent that I can, explain that, but this is a joint venture between J&J and Verily, each bringing, and in terms of J&J, it's, as you mentioned, it's primarily Ethicon's involvement, and each bringing unique value to the table. And you could obviously imagine, what that would be. That involves, Ethicon's very deep expertise in devices, and Verily's very deep expertise in information technology, and their robust interest in emerging interest in robotics and in medical devices. So there's a lot being brought to the table from all sides, and SRI's involvement, clearly, there is a legacy of robotic development at SRI. I mean, as you probably know, the Da Vinci Intuitive was spun out of SRI, a technology that came out of SRI through some DARPA-funded projects. And so there's a great deal of expertise there. We simply just wanted to bring together the best in the industry, to develop the best product. And so that's how that came to be.
Yeah. Well, I like the expression that J&J's Innovation Center uses. They say, we seek to find the best science and technology, no matter where it is, to solve the greatest unmet needs of our time. That's pretty cool. I mean, for an organization to come out and say, hey, you know what, and we don't care what it takes to get there. So they look at everything, and they don't put robots aside. That should be investigated as well. So that's really an unbelievable. You must be really happy to be working where you are right now. Now, this project, the Verb project, we sort of like, it's going to be a while, isn't it, before Verb sort of like gets its its feet under itself, and you go through tests and procedures, and then, I mean, when do you think this would ever get to the marketplace, just like the Da Vinci did? 15, 20 years, or do you see a shorter window?
Oh, I definitely see a shorter window than that. Without being able to get too specific, obviously, on timelines, etc. But this is something that is on the near horizon, and we're, as you said, we're very serious about the mission. We're very serious about how we're going about it, and there's a real there. So we're gonna see products and much sooner than that horizon.
Huh. It looks, from what we're seeing out there, like the end of 2017, probably the beginning of 2018, surgical robotics will begin to rise and then skyrocket. And so.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing some very big players getting into the game. That's a signal. That's a signal from the market that this is becoming more important, and it's also an important signal that the product is going to become refined and targeted and better implemented, and so you're going to have a better product out there, and that's going to pave the way for a continued adoption. But I think anyone who says, well, this is going to die and go away is being incredibly naive.
Do you see the end product being as pricey as the Da Vinci machine? Like $1.5 million up?
No, I mean, I don't, and the reason is simply, once again, because there's competition now, and competition drives down prices. It's just the reality of the market. So, no, I don't think so, and I think that making it, accessible to a wider audience is going to be an important part of the process.
Tomorrow, when you wake up and you start working on the Verb project, what's your next step?
Well, I mean, I think that the answer to that is there isn't just one thing. There's multiple parallel challenges. It's about well, let me put it this way. That's a hard question to answer in a brief way, but I think that if you were to kind of make an umbrella statement around that, the umbrella statement is this: that there's a certain set of needs that clinicians are aware of that we need to design our platform to serve. Okay, so that's one challenge, and identifying those needs is actually a really important process because you can very easily go down the wrong path if you don't really understand your customer, and to borrow a phrase from Clayton Christensen, understand the jobs that they need to get done. What are the solutions that they're looking for? So that's one thing. And then perhaps maybe the next more difficult thing, and many people ascribe this capability to Steve Jobs, and that is the idea that what are the things that they don't even realize they need that we can implement into our platform. And so that is even a bigger, more difficult task. But from my perspective and my role, I spend a lot of my time thinking about, what are those two things, and then how do they come together into a usable, effective platform that surgeons can live with and patients can live with. So that's, I think, maybe a very broad way to answer your question.
We're just about out of time, folks. Thanks again for tuning in to today's show. Again, this webcast will be archived on roboticsbusinessreview.com shortly for those who want to rewatch the presentation or pass it along to a colleague. Thanks again to all the panelists for taking the time to join us, and a big thanks for Maxon Motor for making today's event possible. Take care, everyone. We'll see you in 2017. Happy New Year.